We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast. Today, it's April 15th, 2026. Happy Tax Day, y'all. It's also a Wednesday. Today, we're going to get into Virginia joining the national popular vote movement. What is a monopsony? Have to dig into that one. More American billionaires who don't feel rich. And AI Jesus is available to you to chat to for just $2 a minute. So let's get after it. You know, a lot of times on Wednesday, I try to bring in a smorgasbord of stories, a weird Wednesday. And I was kind of endeavoring to do that today. But the more and more I looked at the aggregate of the stories that I prepared, they're all kind of centered around an idea. And that is that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, or maybe not necessarily good intentions. It's bad ideas, but with good branding, marketing, propaganda, you can fool people who otherwise have good intentions for themselves. It's like the invitation to go to the timeshare weekend. Hey, you tell the wife, we can get this trip paid for. It's 3 days. All we have to sit through is one 90-minute presentation. And you think, oh, I certainly have the gumption to resist any sort of temptation. And then they lock the room and they do some high-pressured sales tactics to you. And they eventually commit you to a lifetime of investment, and you walk away saying, well, if I didn't participate in this timeshare, then it wouldn't force me to go on vacation because I work so darn hard. So it'll actually be an objective good for our lives. And meanwhile, you're blocked out of every single weekend. You wind up paying fees, and you see timeshares for sale for $1 on eBay. So let's start. It's a smorgasbord of stories, but again, with the right spin and propaganda, you could see how people might be convinced to one way of thinking that is dumb and dangerous. And let's begin with NPR, which is doing a very celebratory piece about Virginia. Headline: Virginia joins a national effort to ensure only popular vote winners become president. This is the National Popular Vote Compact. It's an agreement among states to award their presidential electoral votes to the nationwide popular vote winner. With the addition of Virginia, it is now 18 states plus Washington, D.C., for a total of 222 electoral votes. So for those unfamiliar with this compact, let's just take a step back. The way that how we elect a president in this country, the Electoral College. Traditionally, the way that it's gone is that each state has a popular vote. Whoever gets the most votes, even if it's by one vote, they win all of the electors from that state. The way that you calculate the number of electors for state, as they went through in the NPR piece, is all of your congressional representatives plus your 2 senators, whatever that total number is the total number of electors or points. And then your candidates all aggregate their number of electors and their points, and whoever gets to 270, that's the magical number. They get to be president. And then you can get into the faithless electors, and are the electors, when they're actually going to get there, going to pull the lever for the person that they're supposed to pull it for. And this was all the drama in 2020 and other elections as well. Now, these 18 states plus Washington, D.C. have come up with an idea, a way to circumvent that process, to undermine our Constitution. We'll get to that in a second. Their conclusion is, no, we're not going to award our points to whoever wins the popular vote in our state. So Virginia, in this case, whoever wins the state is irrelevant. It's whoever wins the nationwide popular vote, all 50 states plus the District of Columbia, whoever wins the most votes gets the points from Virginia. That's a way to backdoor in a national popular vote. Now, to this point, 18 states, Washington, D.C., the total number that it adds up to does not equal 270. So it hasn't had an impact on the elections. And then the other element as well is which states are going for it. Well, it's all Democrat states, all blue states. I think I found a link to the National Center for Interstate Compacts. Here it is. And it's hard to read, but run through them real quick. These are all solidly Democrat leaning states: California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, Washington, and Washington, D.C. So it doesn't go into effect until they get to 270. But they're laying the groundwork. Well, Steve, how is this possible? We have these pesky, dusty documents. There's Article 2 powers in our Constitution that sort of spell out the president. Well, how much have you read into those Article 2 powers? So let's go to the Constitution, constitution.congress.gov, and I have it highlighted here. Each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress. The one little phrase there, as the legislature thereof may direct. Well, that's old-timey language, but it basically means that the way the state legislature in each state determines, like they did here in Virginia by passing this on through, they get to decide how they select the president. It isn't in the Constitution that we popularly elect these guys. Well, let's make the case. Let's steelman the argument for them. And they do a pretty good job, actually, of it here in NPR. Back to the original piece. And they got some quotations from this guy whose name is Patrick Rosenthal, senior consultant to the National Popular Vote, and he self-described conservative Republican. So all the partisanship here, these are all Democrat leading states and all the Republicans don't want that. Well, this guy's saying, hey, look, I'm on Team GOP and I'm in favor of it. Here's the quote. Quote, I think the idea that any candidate, Republican or Democrat, can focus on the interests of simply the battleground states denies them the opportunity to speak with a full-throated support of most American voters. If we turn this to a system in which every voter in every precinct is politically relevant in the presidential election, not just a handful of precincts, in a handful of battleground states, that obviously changes the outcome of the election. So the case is being made by this conservative Republican that we have now opened up the franchise. Your vote will matter more because if you live in a solidly red or a solidly blue state, do you really have a say in the outcome of the election? It's come down to a couple battleground states at this point. You got Michigan, Ohio's pretty heavily right, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, we had Arizona, Nevada, Georgia. Those were the states that everybody was watching because we all knew who was going to win all the other states. I mean, when the polls close on the East Coast, they immediately call New York. It's going to go for a Democrat. Similarly, when the polls close and Alabama has done, we immediately call that for the Republican. There's not even a dispute. You look at the ticker on cable news on the election night, and it's like 1% of votes counted, state called. I mean, really, you guys can ascertain that? Well, actually, they can because it's that heavily red or that heavily blue. So this guy's making this case, and steel manning it sounds kind of good, right? Sounds like we're going to allow the entire country to pick someone. Now, direct democracy is a recipe for disaster. Democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for dinner. And I think it's a little bit disingenuous. Well, not a little bit. It is extremely disingenuous on this guy's part to say, well, it shouldn't come up to these battleground states. If we opened it up, then everybody would have a say. Well, no, not at all. Because if you're running for political office, it's easier to get out the vote when there are a lot of people around. So instead of watching a couple battleground states, we'll just watch the big cities. Why would you waste your time in rural Arkansas when you can roll on into Dallas? More people, you can bang on way more doors way quickly. You're not going to have to expend nearly the amount of capital as driving around to find those remote rural voters. So you will actually disenfranchise people. And then let's just compare and contrast the two. If we're going to focus on one or the other, what is the better option here? Well, as the National Vote Compact wants. What's it? The National Popular Vote Compact. It will inevitably lead to large cities determining the outcome of presidential elections. What kind of lives do people in big cities lead? Are they anything like yours if you don't live in the big city? Well, no, because if you elect to live in a city, you inevitably elect to have government way more involved in your life. Ergo, this is an argument in favor of greater federal government intrusions into your liberty. It's just inevitable. There is no libertarian leaning city, with the exception of Las Vegas, but there's no moral sentiments there. So, do you really want to live in Las Vegas? Sorry, if you happen to be in the audience from the American Radicals podcast and you live in Vegas, we appreciate it anyway. I don't want to live there. The only times I've been, I just wanted to hug the girls and give them love to tell them that they need to go home to dad. It's gross. Contrast with the current way the Electoral College functions. You are getting Nevada, Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia. Those are a pretty good cross section of the country. I don't think the way that people comport themselves in rural Georgia is very similar to the way they do in suburban Detroit, Michigan. No, I think you're actually getting a better cross section and representation there. We're not going to let perfect be the enemy of good here, but the way things are oriented right now with the Electoral College, you're actually getting perspectives of both the cities and the suburbs and the rural areas, because in each one of those battleground states that have a say in the popular vote, they're being represented. You got Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, big cities. You also got some of the burbs. You also got some of the podunks. Same thing in Arizona. You got Phoenix, and then you got a whole bunch of desert and mountain country. Everyone there is getting a say, and it's had a better overall cross section. So you could see the argument. You can see the argument making the case and kind of making sense. And in essence, though, it's diametrically opposed. It's a dumb and dangerous proposal. All right, let's go and talk about this term that was new to me called monopsony. And it comes from NPR, the piece, but it's kind of weird. And again, for a weird Wednesday, I appreciate the connection they tried to draw here, but it is going to be a dangerous recommendation in the end because it does come from NPR. Headline: The Labor Economics of Alien. Alien being the film Alien, with Ripley, where they were having the alien jump on their face and then jump out of guys' chests. And it's lessons for inequality on Earth. Now, they go down the rabbit hole of explaining the economic principles and the plot of an alien, and we don't need to get into that. But the term monopsony, a monopsony is like the inverse of a monopoly. So a monopoly means that there's one seller, one seller. You play the game, right? You got to try to control the whole board, accumulate enough so that you're in control. And if you are the one seller, you can set the prices. In America, we bust those up. We don't want that. We want competition. Monopsony, though, is not one seller, it's one buyer. Now, in a consumption context, the only way I'm thinking about that would be like the military, right? They would be the only ones buying the hardware that's produced by the military industrial complex. And they seem to spend a lot of money. I don't know if this term holds monopsony, but the way that NPR lays it out actually is with the purchasing of labor, where companies are hiring employees. They're purchasing their time and their skills so that they will go to work. Now, if there's only one employer in a particular industry, then there's not a whole lot of places that you can go because there's only one, and that employer can kind of set the wages. And that's a problem because there could be some exploitation involved there. So again, from this NPR piece, which tries to bring in the labor economics of the film Alien and introduced us to the term monopsony. When there's only a single employer somewhere and they don't face competition, that can give the company extra power over workers. Society needs counterweights to employer power, like a minimum wage, antitrust regulations, public pressure campaigns, business norms about fairness, and labor unions in order for many companies to pay workers a decent wage and treat them fairly. So the argument at the end gives away where NPR falls on this. They want the government involved in all aspects of labor. Let's just take one example, the minimum wage. Do you know how many people actually earn the minimum wage in America? Full-time workers. I mean, not just part-time kid after school, a couple hours at the grocery store. Full-time workers. It's 1%. 1% of Americans actually got this from usafacts.org. And the percentage has never been lower in this country. We see a nice graph here, if you happen to be watching us, where you see the percentage of American hourly workers earning at or below the federal minimum wage is the lowest on record up till 2023 is the most recent data that was included here in USA Facts. And who are these people? Who are these one percenters? Well, later on, we get to this image. The 16 to 24-year-old age range is most likely to earn at or below the federal minimum wage. 16 to 24, teenagers, people who are just entering the workplace. This is almost like an investment in their resumes, it's an investment in the lessons learning. They're not normally at age 16 supporting a family of 5. They just haven't had enough time on this earth. They're getting that work experience, learning the lessons of having an employer, telling them what to do, being somewhere on time, doing things that aren't necessarily that important and vital, but they could be opening up, closing, working the register, retail sort of jobs, 16 to 24. And even then, it's 2%. 2%. Most age 16 to 24, they're earning more than the minimum wage. Then how if it's this small of a percentage? I mean, they made a very sympathetic case in NPR, right? We don't want that one company out there, the company town sort of arrangement, right? You load 16 tons, what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. Well, how does that match up? Well, the reason that you want minimum wages to go up if you hail from NPR is because you're beholden to something else they mention, and that's labor unions. Now, labor unions have kind of outlived their usefulness for the most part in this country. There was a time when we had exploitive labor practices, but a lot of them were hyped up beyond what they actually were. If you read like Upton Sinclair, The Jungle, that was completely fictionalized, and yet it galvanized the country to go about and support the labor unions. They've outlived their usefulness. And in fact, they're an objective force for ill when it comes to a government context because there's actually nobody in the room negotiating on behalf of the American people. Think about it. If you have a federal labor force and they're negotiating against the representative of the people, he's not really representing them because he wants to get reelected. So he'll cut a deal with the labor union. That's the way that works. But why would we want labor unions involved and connected to a minimum wage? Well, because the negotiations that have gone on in places like Detroit, where they manufacture automobiles, the labor unions are so powerful there because they have ensconced political interests and ensconced institutional industrial interests. They've negotiated deals for their members to have their wages tied to the minimum wage. So if the minimum wage goes up, then everybody's wage goes up. And when everybody's wage goes up, the input prices of those labors that causes the product price to go up, and it actually winds up being from each according to his ability to each according to his needs because we redistribute wealth to the labor unions. So in essence, what NPR is arguing for here is bigger government and redistributive principles, i.e. communism, which is really kind of in keeping with what NPR loves to do. Now, along lines of economics, let's talk about this piece from the Washington Post because democracy dies in darkness. Headline, more Americans are millionaires, but they don't feel rich. And this is really just an ode to what is our current economic malaise / inflation situation. The average net worth in the United States is over $1 million per household. Let's just take a moment. That's 1 in 6 households in America. The average net worth of homes in America, households like mom, dad, 2.5 kids, couple cars, 401k, own a house with a mortgage, like the average, the people in the burbs, the average net worth in America of one household is over $1 million. Unthinkable wealth in this country. And yet, how many of those people are shopping for yellow tag beef? It doesn't feel like you're rich. Now, why is that? Washington Post lays out some of the rationale for it. Rising costs have chipped away at the value of $1 million. So they did two ways, which kind of puts it into context. So go back 30 years ago, $1 million stretches about what half $1 million did 30 years ago. Well, I mean, I don't remember 30 years ago. I was still in grade school. I can't really contextualize that understanding. So let's put it the other way. If you had $1 million 30 years ago, what would you need today? So 1996, middle of the Clinton administration, you got $1 million. What would it really be worth today? And when I say $1 million, I mean net worth. Be over $2 million, because inflation has caused the dollars in your bank account to become worth less and worth less and worth less until they've been halved in value. You could buy half of what you could if you're a child of the 90s. You go to the grocery store now, it costs you twice as much writ large. And there's some independent categories that might have stayed stable and maybe went down a little bit. But by and large, your grocery bill, if you did your weekly shopping and it cost you $100 in 1996, in 2026, it's costing you $200. I do our shopping. I've noticed here in the friend household that it's gone up in the last month or so by 15%. Now, outside of that comparison, how much of the wealth that Americans have is truly liquid? How much it is at their fingertips, like Scrooge McDuck? They can go into the vault and go swim through all those gold coins. Another 90s child reference here on the AMRAD pod. That's a nice one. It's like 5%, between 4 and 6% of the money that you could spend it on is actually at your disposal, because people own a house, they have a retirement account, and they're 40 years old, right? If you're 40 years old, you got a great 401k, things are looking really good for you in your golden years, but you can't do anything with that right now without significant penalties. I mean, you might feel kind of rich. You might feel like a man when you're 40.
Come after me. I'm a man. I'm 40.
But you can't eat the equity in your house. And it's also this overall number. It's an average, right? They add up everybody and then they get the total amount and they divide it by the total number of households. So it's being skewed by a significant wealth gap that's going on here. And I know I sound like I'm a communist when I talk about the wealth gap, okay? But we do have what is referred to as a K-shaped economy. Think about the letter K. You got those two legs kicking out from it, one going up, one going down. There is a situation now where we have haves and have-nots, and then in the aggregate, when you find the average of everything, when you add up Elon Musk to the guy who's actually in the 1% earning the minimum wage, it looks like the American households are around $1 million, and we all kind of do high fives and wave pom-poms and hand out helmet stickers thinking like, hey, it's as a golden age, it's never been seen before. But that wealth, quote unquote, isn't real. It's vapor. I mean, look at your 401k. Look at any sort of investments that you have right now. The value of those stock holdings might be worth a lot on paper, but in order to access it, you'd have to sell. And if a lot of people sold them, the values would come down. And then also the money that's going into the stock market right now is keep juicing it up, juicing it up, juicing it up with more money that the government has printed or borrowed or stolen, I mean, tax from you, and then reinvested, turn around, give it to those top 7 companies in the S&P 500. There's just a lot of dollars that are kind of worthless in there. So the overall numbers are high, and we look back and realize that we can buy half of what we could 30 years ago, even though we've never looked richer. And that isn't just in the investments and stock markets. I mean, that's the same place with housing. There are 200 cities in America where the average home costs $1 million plus. Just the average starter home, $1 million. That's unbelievable. And if you happen to own your house, let's say you have some equity into it, you can't eat that equity. What are you going to do? What if you want to realize that equity? What if you got a 30-year mortgage, you're 15 years into it, halfway there, and you realize, wow, we've got a couple $100,000 here, kind of turn it into empty nesters, and maybe you want to sell the house. I want to realize that equity, you want to downsize and have some cash at my disposal, but you can't sell the house now. There's way more sellers out there than buyers because of interest rates, which are a whole other thing that's dealing with inflation, and just how many houses are on the market, supply and demand. More houses out there, prices are going to come down. Are you willing to throw away 15 years of mortgage payments? Or are you just going to stay put? And if you stay put, do you really have that wealth? You can't go to the store when you buy your yellow tag beef and plop down your mortgage agreement and say like, hey, you know what I'm really worth? I'm worth over $1 million. They're going to say, that's great, fantastic. It's still going to cost you some actual cash to make your purchase here. So it can't be realized. So this is the economic conditions that people find in. So we hear just how awesome we're doing, but it's not necessarily true. All right, I want to pivot over to a couple of crazy ideas that are going on at a state level, or just notions that we're getting, and from the blue states, the ones that have joined the National Vote Compact. But before we do, guys, I want to give you your one-time show reminder here on the American Radicals podcast, available on Rumble and YouTube every weekday, noontime at AmRadPod. And also head on over to Spotify. I appreciate it there. If you would, just follow us there. You can one time a week push play, even if you watch us here on Rumble or YouTube, mute it, help boost those numbers out there. We're officially monetized, but we got to get a little bit bigger for those to be interested in actually airing a commercial or two on the program so we can realize that wealth here and go from the amateur to the professional endeavor. So if we're lucky enough today to make this the day, then here's your warning that I will run the ad right about now. And if not, that's fine. If so, just fast forward a minute. All right, let's talk about California and Massachusetts. First, the Golden State. As goes California, goes the nation. And this came from the governor's office. Governor Gavin Newsom, American Psycho, might be President American Psycho here in a couple of years if things don't turn around. And the governor's office put this out on Twitter. While America suffers, Chevron profits. And it has a screenshot from a Reuters article a couple days ago, April 9th. Chevron said on Thursday it expected first quarter upstream earnings to rise between $1.6 billion and $2.2 billion from the previous quarter, fueled by higher oil prices due to the Iran war, though an impact from hedging could weigh on results. So the governor's dunking on big business because his office is populated by a bunch of communists who hate big business. You know, Chevron, which probably hires a lot of people, which signs the front of the checks, but they have to villainize these institutions so that they can characterize them as being a force for ill and galvanize people to vote a certain way. I mean, it's class politics. It's classic communist. Reward your friends, punish your enemies. But it was quick to point out on this. And again, they're trying to say that a company that's providing a good or service that people want, need, and desire or are willing to part with their hard-earned money in order to consume, like oil, which impacts everyone every day in all things. Oil touches us constantly. But they're the bad guy because they're earning way more money. Well, they're earning way more money because of government policies engaging in kinetic operations. Definitely not a war in the Middle East. How dare you call me a stewardess? I am, after all, a flight progress coordinator. But it's a product that people want, need, and desire. And really, what are the profit margins? And it was pointed out here, which was kind of hysterical. There was a community note on it, and it blew my mind. The state of California actually makes more per gallon of gasoline sold than oil producers. So here's the image. It comes from energy.ca.gov, their own website, and it breaks down a $4 per gallon gas. I guess this was before the huge hike in prices. And for those in California in the AmRad pod audience, I think you would be extremely happy with $4. But the way that it breaks down is between state excise tax, 61 cents, state and local sales tax, 9 cents, and underground storage tank fees, 2 cents. That's 71 cents a gallon that goes to the coffers for California. How much does Chevron make with all their billions? They make 20 cents. So more than 3x the money goes to California government coffers. So you can see how you can convince people that the oil companies are evil, right? We don't want them, that dirty carbon in the atmosphere. We should bankrupt them. We should move past these sorts of things. And if they refuse to go away, we'll just suck off all that wealth and we'll transfer it to the people. Two wolves and a sheep voting what to have for dinner. But in essence, they're already doing that. California needs Chevron. It needs every oil producer out there. 70 cents per gallon for our most populated state in the country. Now, oil, like I said, drives everything. And that is a subject of something going on right now in Massachusetts. So this is a bill that has been proposed, and it's characterized in one way. And I think if you are a fan of the show, you will realize what we're getting at. So there is a bill in the Massachusetts Senate to track and fine residents who drive too much. New proposal. Senate Bill 2246 would push the state's transportation system to reduce vehicle miles traveled as part of its climate strategy, because we have a hole in the ozone layer, y'all, and lots of that acid rain. Again, another 90s reference. The measure directs state agencies to set targets for reducing vehicle miles traveled and to align road, transit, and land use decisions with those goals. So the way they're trying to spin it, and we can steel man it here, is, look, we're not going to regulate you. We're not going to ask you to tell us what your odometer says today and what it says tomorrow, what it says next week, what it says on January 1st, December 31st. No, no, no. We just have a climate initiative. We got to bring down our CO2 emissions in the state. So we're going to reconfigure the way we do things. And we need to figure out how people are driving so that we can find more direct routes. So we reduce the number of miles that people are actually driving, because transportation puts too much carbon in the atmosphere. And then we're also going to encourage people to do things that'll bring that number down. If they have to make the trip at all, if they can't just stay home and stay safe, well, they can hop on a bus. Or you know what? That bus, it's kind of stinky. It's hard to maintain. It's using a lot of diesel. And if you've seen the price of diesel, maybe we could just encourage people to move to the city. That way they could walk everywhere. They could ride bikes. It'll be good for Gaia. No more hole in the ozone layer. No more acid rain. We'll achieve all our goals. Oh, and you know what else we can do? Where was Massachusetts on that national popular vote compact? Oh, that's right. They were in favor of it. They can have the vote. They can have the vote determined by the cities that willingly accept more government into their life. So you see how you can characterize this and say, look, we're just trying to be good stewards of the environment, when really the ulterior motive is to drive us all into these communist hellscape areas that are essentially ceded territory at this point. Okay, I've got two more I want to get to, and this one comes from the Washington Post, and it comes from an old but a goodie, Leanna Wen. It's an opinion piece. Headline: The raw milk movement is dumb and dangerous, but don't overreact. So Leanna Wen makes the following case. It's easy to respond to the raw milk movement with outrage. After all, it will almost certainly lead to more foodborne illnesses. Still, I think it's important for public health leaders to take a more measured approach. While they should be clear about the risks of drinking raw milk, it simply is not on the same scale as vaccines. That she goes into dunk on RFK and the catastrophic decisions, and she tries to do a statistical breakdown about how raw milk is pretty awful for you. And then she comes up with this. Raw milk proponents make their strongest argument when they frame the issue as a matter of choice. One could argue, of course, that the decision doesn't just affect the person choosing to drink the raw milk, because she says, oh, parents feed it to kids and they're hurting their children. But the question then becomes, at what point does the government have a responsibility to intervene in people's poor choices? This is coming from Leanna Wen, who was an outspoken advocate of every single coronavirus measure that was taken. Stay home, stay safe, shut down your non-essential business that you use to feed your family and pay your mortgage. Put masks on your face. Walk one way down grocery aisles. We should have forcible vaccinations to go back to school. You should wear 2 masks, actually. That'd be better for you. Ridiculous. Poor choices. Get the gene juice. Experimental vaccine is absolutely safe and effective. And now she's conjuring up or, sort of noodling around. Where does personal autonomy in the alleged land of the free, where we actually have it memorialized in a compact with our government that we are the arbiter of our future? We want very, very small involvement from our government. In the alleged land of the free, what role does government have in overriding people's, well, as she believes, poor decisions? This is dumb and dangerous to drink raw milk. How dare you? And then the outsized influence, she says, well, I mean, the better argument to have on personal autonomy. This isn't worth the fight. She's saying, don't use your political capital on raw milk. If they want to drink it, like, okay, they might get sick and die. Okay, their kids might get sick and die. And really, that's probably good because it'll hurts the conservative vote in this country. She's on favor of that. But she wants to expend that political capital on vaccinations, where she says that, if you don't get in, if you don't take the shots in your arm, well, then you're hurting other people, which, unless you're willing to do second and third level thinking, is actually a pretty compelling case. I mean, do you want measles outbreak in school? If you don't get it, you could spread measles around. Or let me just take a moment and think about this. If I don't have a vaccine for a particular illness, and I sit next to somebody who does have a vaccine for a particular illness, why would they be worried about me if their vaccine works? So your case actually has no logical basis in reality. It just brings up the fundamental issue of, at what point does our government get to intrude on personal autonomy in the name of public safety? All right. Oh, and then, before I move on, Leanna Wen, said she was a big outspoken advocate for the coronavirus madness. I have her page here from Washington Post. Leanna Wen actually comes from China, where the Wuhan flu originated. She's a woman who originated from China, which means her parents had her and didn't adhere to the one-child policy, where so many Chinese parents killed their baby girls. And they actually immigrated to America, where she could have every opportunity in the world. And then she ascended to leadership levels of Planned Parenthood, where they love to murder babies. And apparently she didn't love murdering babies quite enough, so they fired her. So that's who Leanna Wen actually is, not really arguing from an impartial, I'm a doctor, just the facts, trust the science sort of position. All right, now we'll get to the last one I got. And I teased it in the beginning. And I saw this, and, dumb and dangerous. Let's touch on some AI. Headline: tech company launches AI Jesus you can talk to for $2 a minute. The company is called Just Like Me. It's a tech company that creates AI versions of celebrities, experts, and personalities. So they're moving to the Lord and Savior. The AI version of Jesus is said to offer words of prayer and encouragement, speak a variety of languages, recall prior conversations with users who like to talk to Jesus through AI. It costs you $2 a minute, well, actually $1.99, or you can get a package deal price of $49.99 that gives you 45 minutes. So you get a few extra minutes with AI Jesus. What could possibly go wrong? What is dumb and dangerous about this? About throwing AI onto a divinity figure, an AI that relies on the algorithm that's developed by humans, that have biases, that is built to actually engage with the person to trick them into engaging more. Now, I mean, if it engages with prayer more, that's probably a good thing. People say, why wouldn't you want people to talk to Jesus, Steve? I don't have a problem with that. But I have a problem with them talking to who they perceive to be Jesus, and it's not. It's just ones and zeros, particularly AI that can be designed to say things that were never actually uttered by Jesus or a celebrity or a historical figure. In fact, I can think of one particular example. I mean, who remembers when we said AI George Washington would be in favor of international entanglements, foreign entanglements, which were diametrically opposed to what he told us? Don't remember? How about here?
I understood my responsibility, and I also understood that some things that are easy to forget when you're staring down bayonets.
Yeah, AI doesn't stutter either. So completely organic there, right? That was just George Washington in a blue t-shirt. He totally wouldn't go talk on national television wearing a suit or his military uniform, which was his actual habit. All right. Well, that's the end for the American Radicals podcast for today, guys. We covered down on a whole bunch of stuff, dumb and dangerous stuff and 90s stuff. So I think an appropriate way to send you off for today is our palate cleanse, which is talking about some dumb and dangerous things that we did in the 90s to bring it full circle. All right, guys. Appreciate it as always. If you haven't already, give us a nice thumbs up, follow, share, subscribe here on Rumble and YouTube. We'll plan to be back with you tomorrow, noontime Eastern. And until then, have a great day.
You've been listening to the American Radicals podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AmRadPod.